The ex-wife of Adam Kokesh has recently posted a video on YouTube where she accuses him of being a textbook narcissistic abuser, an exploiter who lured her into the marriage, showering her with love and attention at first, and as soon as she was completely dependent of him, he supposedly showed his real face, worked her like a slave, constantly undermining her self-esteem, her ego boundaries, driving her into depression, then verbally attacking her for dragging him down with her bad mood. Ultimately, she was close to suicide, but luckily got herself out of this mess, and Adam's most loyal fans, of course, assume that she is just making this up to get revenge. So, take a quick look at this here. This is the video uploaded very recently.
Like therapy and all that, so I knew who I was. And when I met Adam, I was swept off my feet. You know, we were talking every day for 2 hours, and he would let me talk, and he was like, wow, you know, you are my soulmate. And 2 months later, I was convinced that, you know, he was the one, and I was going to go on tour with him. And I sold my car, and I sold my home, and, well, I gave away my home, so I didn't really sell it. And I didn't get a lot of money back from my car because I had a payment on it, so I got like $800 back for it. I also sold all my possessions, and I left everybody that I loved to move in with him. And that was me. That was my responsibility, and I really, you know, I took that risk. And honestly, I'm glad I did. I am, because I've met the people that I've met, and I've become very strong because of this situation. 2 months into our relationship, Adam's behavior really started to change towards me. I went from his perfect soulmate to I was working like a slave every day. I worked for 40 hours or plus a week for him, driving him around, doing his administrative chores, and I got an allowance of $40 a week.
So, is this real? Is she describing the real Adam Kokesh, or is she just a vindictive woman who didn't get what she wanted out of this, and now she's making this up, and she found this thing on the internet where women talk about male narcissistic abuse, and this sounded like something she wanted to pin on him, you know? So, this is the latest controversy about this man who has become a small star in the alternative media circus, especially within the cult of anarcho-capitalism, which is blaming the borders and the Constitution and the Republic for everything. So, who is this Adam Kokesh really? Adam Kokesh is, of course, a U.S. Armed Forces veteran. The military didn't want him anymore at some point because he broke the rules. He then reinvented himself as an anti-war activist, landed himself a show on the English-speaking Russian propaganda channel RT. Then RT didn't want him anymore because he broke the rules. Then he started his own show from his basement, surrounded himself with questionable people. He smoked various substances on camera, instructed his audience how to order drugs on the internet. Then he had this idea of an armed march on Washington, D.C., which was canceled when people found out this was a harebrained idea. And the authorities announced they would not let protesters over the bridge into D.C. Then Adam published the famous video in which he is loading a firearm in Washington, D.C., announcing the new American Revolution. This was just intended to be another publicity stunt to get him attention, but the authorities sent him a SWAT team. He initially thought this was just going to be a thing that his lawyer can handle, and, you know, this will just get him attention, but then a SWAT team came. Because the authorities checked his file, saw that he was an unstable drug-promoting armed forces veteran. He got busted. His friends scrambled to grab donations and fought each other. Then Adam got sentenced, and he is now touring the country promoting his anarcho-capitalist book. He currently has over 200,000 subscribers on YouTube, and who knows when his probation thing or whatever, when this runs out, who knows what he's going to do next, what new publicity stunts he's going to pull out of his hat. And when I first took notice of him, he seemed like a capable guy, very presentable appearance. He did his thing against Bush in the wars and so on, and he got promoted by Alex Jones, was a regular guest, and years ago, I still had some trust for Alex Jones's guests. I still had some trust left in Alex Jones's judgment. And so Adam Kokesh had his show on Russia Today. He had the opportunity to become really powerful and influential. And whoa, little did we know about the real Adam. His father is the Jewish lawyer Charles Kokesh, kind of a crooked person, not really following the rules. The SEC accused him of shenanigans with $45 million from investors. Then in Florida, there was some stuff going on against him, and then there was a lawsuit by a loan company, and supposedly there was $4.3 million of debt for a house, and so there was a lawsuit. And Adam's father has been accused of using shenanigans to not pay in time. And then there was a horse park. The Los Alamos National Bank sued him for $2.25 million of unpaid debt. Adam's mother is a shrink, and she's part of a band, and parents are supposedly divorced. And Adam, during his childhood, was sent to three different boarding schools. So, right away, this is, it's not exactly a good thing to be sent to a boarding school, especially if there's 3 boarding schools. And then with 14, Adam, according to reports, Adam was put into a boot camp for young people. And usually that's being done with young folks who are uncontrollable, just out of control teenagers, troublesome teenagers. And when he joined the military later as an adult, when he went to war, when he actually went to war, he was, according to his own words, he was pretty harsh to his mother, pretty cold towards his mother. And you can find that here. I have that for you. This is a story. Meet Iraq veteran Adam Kokesh, the new mouthpiece of the anti-war movement. Adam Kokesh by Holiday Dmitry, Radar Online. This is from 2007. That's when he was still running around all the time with his military backpack and his hat and his veteran shirt. I don't think he does that anymore. So that was during the end of the Bush era, when it was, when a lot of people try to make money of being a Bush critic and a war critic. So here you can find a lot of interesting quotes. So he went to war. And instead of a warm, emotional goodbye with his parents and his mother, there was no such thing. There was no such thing. If you look at the search term, here it is. He was at some point when he met Cindy Sheehan, formerly vocal mother of a soldier who died in Iraq. He was realizing how callous he had been to his own mother about being deployed. So he says, "My mother was afraid for me in Iraq, but you should be more afraid now. And now the government is after him." Ooh. Doesn't that sound important? He's just a guy who's just saying things about the war, and then he's claiming the government is after him. So he's a sought after, rebel. So obviously, you see there was, the relationship with his mother was troublesome, and he was callous and cold towards his mother when he left for war. And if you combine that with these facts about the boot camp and the prep schools and so on, you quickly realize that this sort of childhood increases the chances of a narcissistic personality or narcissistic personality traits later, and not being such a great guy towards women. Of course, that's not proof here that he treated his later wife badly, that Adam mistreated his wife the way she says he did. It's not exactly proof, but it shows us that Adam did not have a nice childhood, and the relationship with his mother was pretty troubled apparently, and so, and also his father is a weird person into a lot of trouble, and so that might have shaped the young Adam and have made him the person he is today. Not good signs, ladies and gentlemen, because for a certain personality type, and of course it's always a spectrum, narcissism is a spectrum, antisocial is a spectrum, then you have only certain traits, without a full-blown disorder, but without an actual disorder, but you can see all the warning signs, you can see all the red flags, and you see troublesome behavior from Adam, really troublesome behavior from his early childhood until today. So he doesn't just hate government rules, he seems to hate all kinds of rules, and he seems to be unable to follow them. And these are all warning signs, these are all red flags. And of course, the unsteady life, his unsteady childhood, going from place to place, school to school, then the military, then he becomes this activist, and then he does this, and then he goes there, and he does this, and legal trouble. He goes here, and now he just tours the country. He has no fixed set place to live, and apparently he now bought himself some land in Arizona or something. But you can see that it's an unsteady life, and that's a big warning sign. Then his short military career, and Adam Kokesh begging to be let back into Iraq. It's also a very important chapter in Adam's life. So he was 18. He was applying for the reserve of the United States Marine Corps. So they stuck him into they stuck him into the 5th Battalion, 14th Marines Reserve Artillery Battalion in Seal Beach, California. And from 2000 until 2003, he was sent to Claremont McKenna College to study psychology. So this was not active duty. This was not active military duty. He was learning psychology. And then came the deployment with the 3rd Civil Affairs Group. Between January and August 2004, he went to the Iraqi province of Al-Anbar. So, according to his own biography, he didn't see much. He didn't see much battle. He didn't see much of what a normal soldier would see. It was just 18 days. He saw 18 days of classical deployment, combat, hot zones, whatever. Just 18 days. His unit was added to a battalion in Fallujah. So these soldiers, these specific soldiers that Adam was with, they worked in civil affairs. They were giving out food to Iraqis while the battalion was securing houses and the checkpoint, and helped here and there. So, according to Adam Kokesh's own words, own descriptions, his unit just gave cash and food to civilians and contractors or contract companies. But still, he got a combat ribbon or something. So he got a few ribbons, he got a few promotions, and apparently he was kind of following the rules, and he wanted a military career. He liked what he was doing. He was not. He was climbing up the ranks. You know, it's not what you would think. Him being an anarcho-capitalist government hater today, he was fine with this. He was fine with this. He had a military job. He got paid. He was mostly just handing out cash and food. He saw very little combat, so that's what he liked. And but then he broke the rules. He came back from Iraq, and apparently he smuggled a pistol home, and he got caught. So why would he even do this? Of course, it's what many soldiers want to do, or even officers want to do, a commemorative pistol or something that the Iraqis will give you. They give you a nice handgun, could be even worth a lot of money, very ornamental, and just a nice piece, so you remember your time served in military duty. And but you can't just bring that home. It has to go through the proper channels, and has to be done right. And apparently Adam didn't do it right. He just smuggled that home. He got caught. Even though he's an American citizen, he can get a gun anytime he wants. It's not just about, you know, him getting a gun as a citizen in America. He could get a gun everywhere. But he broke the rules. And maybe this wasn't the only time he broke the rules, because the military did not want him anymore. There were 3 felony charges against him in the military. 3 felony charges, but the stuff was handled internally, and he just got busted ultimately for a misdemeanor charge, right? But the military let him off easy, but the military didn't want him anymore. He just had been promoted to sergeant. Imagine, you know, he's the government-hating guy, but he actually rose up the ranks to a sergeant. So they made him a corporal again. They graded him down. They demoted him to corporal. They still gave him an honorable discharge, and they made clear to him that they did not want him anymore, especially they didn't want him anymore in a foreign assignment. And so Kokesh himself says, and this is from a website called American Patriots Against Kokesh. I'm going to show you the link here on the monitor. And here, American Patriots Against Kokesh. So there's more background to this. And hang on a second. So here you can find this. Adam Kokesh brought this pistol home. Adam got busted, and he wanted to go out again. He was begging, Adam Kokesh was begging to go back to war, to Iraq. He was preparing to go to Ramadi. He was begging and begging, but the military wouldn't let him go. So he signed up for another year in the hopes he was going back to Iraq, but he was made to mow the lawn, and he kept begging, but they refused. They did not want him anymore. So, does this sound like a soldier who has post-traumatic stress disorder, who couldn't be a soldier anymore because of his conscience and because the war was so wrong and Bush was so bad and the whole thing was wrong, and his conscience wouldn't let him wouldn't let him continue to be a soldier, and he had post-traumatic stress. Does that sound like it? No, he was begging to go back. He liked the job. It wasn't the hardest military job. He just saw 18 days of a hot zone. So this sounds more like a chronic breaker of rules, and someone who gets who suffers rejection again and again because people do not want him anymore. So November 2006, he understood, okay, the military doesn't want me anymore, and so he reinvented himself as an anti-war activist. So the military wouldn't let him, so he just said, oh, screw you guys, I'm gonna make a career in media and become this big shot. And suddenly he talked a lot about post-traumatic stress and how wrong the war was, even though he begged for a year to get back into the war and make money with it. And then, of course, because of his supposed, I think it's even diagnosed, because of his post-traumatic stress, he treated himself with alcohol and Xanax. So in public, for a while, he called himself Sergeant Kokesh, even though he was demoted back to a Lance Corporal, a E3 rank. So that's the same thing as a private first class in the regular army, so that's not a whole lot. After he was discharged, he was still part of the Individual Ready Reserve, and during anti-war protests, he was still wearing uniform, parts of his uniform, or uniform clothing. So he got the attention for his publicity stunts, but a major of the Marine Corps saw him or took notice of Adam wearing these clothings, and so then there was an investigation for a breach of the uniform code. Kokesh answered to this guy because he wrote him or called him up, and Kokesh replied with an insult. So he was part of the Individual Ready Reserve. He was not completely detached from the military. He broke the rules again, the uniform code. Then he got notified, and Adam Kokesh insults the officer, insults the Marine Corps officer. So that got Adam a second investigation. Misconduct. So retroactively, his honorable discharge was changed into a less than honorable discharge. So through that, he lost $10,000. It says in various reports, he lost $10,000, and he lost healthcare benefits and so on. So again, Kokesh, he doesn't care about any rules. He signed up for this. He made this contract. He signed up for this, but he breaks the rules, and of course, then he gets himself into trouble. So then he sought out the company of leftists. A lot of leftist anti-war groups like Code Pink, Answer, MoveOn.org, SDS, Socialists, the IVAW, and other prominent anti-war activists. So this was the end of the George Bush era. The left-wing anti-war people, they had, their heyday, right? Trying to make careers out of this. And so then Kokesh got his job at the Russian propaganda channel, English-speaking channel, Russia Today, or RT. So during the Cold War, the Soviet KGB was spending a lot of money and effort to influence Western audiences. And it was, of course, the Operation Ares to influence public opinion in the United States. Then the Russians, the KGB, financed the Stockholm Conference about Vietnam and put a lot of undercover KGB people in there. And, of course, the Russian intelligence created a lot of fake photos about American war crimes. And when the United States when the United States Armed Forces withdrew from Vietnam, the communists in Vietnam massacred about 2 million people. So, of course, the Cold War was a lot more difficult, a lot more complicated than just East versus West, right? The West had built up the Eastern Bloc. Western elite companies had financed or sold a lot of technology to the Russians. So it's all a little more complicated, but this is some of the background knowledge that you need. So the KGB's job was to convince the world that Moscow and Russia and the Soviets were the good guys, were just defending themselves against NATO, that Russia was the big great hope, and so on and so on. And after the end of the Cold War, nothing really changed in Russia. Nothing substantial changed in Russia, right? There was not a real revolution. People did not get in trouble. You know, the Soviet elite from the military, intelligence, and so on, they never get in trouble. You know, they didn't get sentenced to anything. The dictatorship in Russia just transformed, right? But Adam still took the job. Of course, in the Bush era, during the Bush era, almost nobody, nobody really took notice of Russia. Nobody cared about Russia. Russia, for most people, was just this blank spot, this blank area on the map. So hey, what many people would have accepted that job at Russia today, and to be seen in many U.S. households via satellite or whatever. So, but still, it was still a horrible regime. It was the transformed Soviet regime, and Adam Kokesh took a job at a media outlet controlled by Kremlin insiders. So that's a very big issue, you know. So he's supposedly this freedom guy and this pro-America guy, but he's actually working for the Russians. And we all know how much the Russians lie, or at least you should know how much the Russians lie. So this is a very big issue. This is a very big problem, right? Adam wanted to work for Uncle Sam. Adam wanted so bad to work for the United States military, but he broke the rules and they would not have him. They wouldn't let him in again. They had enough of him. So what does he do? In his rage, what does he do in his anger? He goes to the other side. He decides to work for the other superpower, the competing superpower. And who knows what kind of things he signed up for when he started to work for the Russians. And even on his own show, his own basement show later, Adam Kokesh kept defending Russia. He kept inviting Russian propagandists, and this was really, really disgusting. So, So Adam Kokesh was sort of a fake Pat Tillman. You remember Pat Tillman? Do you remember Pat Tillman? He was a tall, muscular guy. He was a real war veteran. He was in real combat for a long time. Pat Tillman received the Silver Star and the Purple Heart. He gave up his pro football career. He was a famous guy before he went to the military, and Pat Tillman was the real deal. Pat Tillman criticized the war while he was in it, right? Adam Kokesh, he just started bitching. Adam Kokesh just started bitching and moaning after his military service, when they would not let him back, and he had been bagging a whole year. Pat Tillman was the real deal. He saw real combat. He got some real decorations. He criticized the war while he was in it, during the war, and then of course Pat Tillman got killed. So then another publicity stunt. 2007, Kokesh travels to Germany, where I live, and And he brought along another reserve military guy, and they brought along an unauthorized civilian, and they entered a military base. And in a mess hall, this is actually pretty close to where I live, in a mess hall, he was reading a letter from the people of Ansbach. And the city of Ansbach, right next to it, there's a huge... There's... in the city of Ansbach, there is a huge United States military base. So at that place, he was reading this letter, talking to the soldiers who are about to go into Iraq, and he basically encouraged them to desert. And Adams' organization was Iraq Veterans Against the War. Kokesh was a big supporter of the Democratic Party. And his partner, Geoffrey Millard, who is kind of a phony, they went really deep into the left, right? So he tried to become a big shot on the left. And you still find some old videos with Millard and Kokesh. Millard had injuries. He practically never saw combat. He was just an office guy. He tried to leave the army for medical reasons. Then he tried to leave the military for conscientious reasons, conscientious objection, whatever. And then he became an activist and tried to become famous and rubbing shoulders with every other prominent anti-war activist. And some veterans, they looked at this Millard guy and they found a whiny nobody who just didn't show up anymore at some point. So this Millard guy made all kinds of wild claims, like he had a serious officer rank, but apparently he was just a specialist, had a specialist rank. Very few commendations, but in public he runs around with all kinds of ribbons and stuff. He claims to have been a soldier deployed all over the world, but the documents, they speak a different language, and supposedly there was even an investigation against him, you know. So, next chapter, Adam and the drugs. Adam Kokesh and the drugs. That's a big, big chapter. So, behind me on the monitor, you see a video, how to buy drugs on the Silk Road. He put that on YouTube, and he says the video was censored and blocked, and at some point now, because the Silk Road has been busted, people can't go on the Silk Road anymore on the internet to buy drugs illegally. So YouTube apparently unblocked this video. So here it is again. And of course, you saw there were a couple of other videos when Adam was smoking different substances, and he claimed it was DMT, or he was smoking stuff that looked like pot, and he seemed really stoned and really out of it. But apparently, he got into trouble with YouTube, a private company, by the way. He got in trouble with YouTube because YouTube has a user policy, and it prohibits the I think it prohibits the glorification of drugs, and prohibits encouragement of drug use and drug trafficking, you know, some sort of thing. So then, of course, Adam Kokesh, he became panicked, you know, because he didn't want to get tossed off YouTube, you know, and if you're not on YouTube, you don't exist, right? So he kind of took down a few videos, and he claimed all this stuff was just theatrics. This is the common YouTube defense, you know, for people admitting to illegal stuff or doing illegal stuff on YouTube. They just say it's YouTube, it's entertainment, it's not real, it's just media. Nobody can, you know, nobody can nail me for this. But let's remember, at this point, he was already this big libertarian, supposedly libertarian star. I mean, he failed as a sort of conservative military guy, then he failed as a leftist anti-war superstar, and then he tried to become a libertarian star, and he tied libertarianism into drug use or even drug abuse, right? Confounding, conflating, and confusing. So he was a big libertarian guy, but he was violating the rules of this private company, YouTube, right? So he couldn't be bitching and moaning about this is government censorship or the evil government is out to get me. No, this was just a private company, and Adam was violating the terms of service, the user services. He was breaking the rules again. Private contract rules, free market rules. So then he, Adam took down a few videos, and now he brought him back, and we still have screenshots of something that Adam apparently wrote. Let me show you this here. This Ain't Hell blog. Adam Kokesh, starring in the disappearing paragraph caper. So here you see a screenshot of a blog post. Apparently that was from. So that could be actually from Adam. And so in this blog post it says I was using gin and Xanax, a phase of serious alcoholism, and of course Xanax, alprazolam, benzodiazepines. This is used against post-traumatic stress and panic attacks, panic disorders. But of course, this makes you an addict pretty quickly. So Adam said he was having this post-traumatic stress disorder, and he tried to fix himself, but he was the one begging to go back into Iraq. So I'm not really buying this. I'm not really buying this stuff that he says about he took drugs to fix himself, fix his post-traumatic stress. Then he changed to marijuana and hallucinogenics like DMT, magic mushrooms. And so it appears he did a lot of that stuff, and he called that freedom. He called all that freedom, and he was promoting the illegal marketplace, Silk Road. And Silk Road was just there to make more money for the owner, this Dread Pirate Roberts guy, who still denies, of course, that he ever was the mastermind behind this. And he's got fans who just repeat all these libertarian slogans. But the fact of the matter is, these folks, they benefited a lot financially from drugs being illegal, just like any drug dealer out there. They were making millions because drugs were illegal, and they didn't really care what people did with those drugs, how much damage this caused. They were making money off of it and giving people libertarian slogans that they wanted to hear. It's freedom, it's your choice, it's also good and nice, but pretty much all drugs keep you in a prison. Almost all drugs can be pretty dangerous, especially if you do a lot of that. And so, yeah, then there was a Fox News report that said Adam Kokesh is 70% disabled because of his war, his time in the war, and he gets social benefits to not starve, basically. Isn't that interesting? So then, when he was at RT, Russia Today, he got confronted by I think by Cliff Kincaid, asking about how many rubles do you get paid, to do this Russian propaganda. And Adam said, yeah, he gets enough. They pay him enough, and this is all just a big joke to him. Really, really not likable. Really not a nice thing to do. And in this video, in this confrontation, Adam said something along those lines. I was hoping for like helicopters and troops, but I got a television show instead, from the Russians. So you might want to go back to that video and find that. Cliff Kincaid confronts Adam Kokesh. and listen for yourself and ask yourself, what does Adam mean? Does Adam really hope Russian troops come to the United States to start a new order, to take power over America? Does he think this would be a temporary fix? Is he really that silly? Is he really that dishonest? Or incompetent? Oh, and by the way, when he was telling people in this video, in this very video, when he was telling people how to buy drugs illegally on the Silk Road on the internet, he probably didn't tell people that this was a stupid idea, right? Because law enforcement could easily go to these marketplaces and pose as sellers of drugs and pose as buyers of drugs. And law enforcement does this all the time, because this the whole idea of this anonymous or this quasi-anonymous market on the deep web, this whole idea is stupid. It doesn't matter which illegal market it is. Law enforcement always gets on there. They always pose as sellers and buyers and track the parcels and find ways to bust people. And then, of course, when he was with Russia Today, he broke the rules again. He supported Ron Paul, the American candidate, 2012, Republican candidate, and of course, he was getting his money from a foreign country. He was working for a foreign media company, and foreign countries are not supposed to meddle in U.S. elections. So Adam broke the rules again, and he got tossed out, basically, or he was let go, or he resigned, or whatever. So then he did his own show, and he became weirder and weirder, doing more drugs, shaving his head, looking like Emperor Ming. And then came his harebrained idea, this art march in Washington. This could have ended in a mass shooting. This could have ended really badly. And of course, people pointed out the Constitution and Bill of Rights, they don't allow you to carry a weapon in Washington, D.C., and this is a stupid idea, and the lawyers say it's a stupid idea, and this can't work. And Adam threw a fit. He threw a temper tantrum. He was hopping mad about people not supporting his harebrained scheme. He was calling out the Oath Keepers. He was hailing abuse towards Lou Rockwell and more people. And unfortunately, Alex Jones had him on a few times where he was promoting this stupid idea. And Alex Jones was not 100% with this idea, but sort of. And, just instead of shooting this down, instead of not giving this attention, Alex Jones promoted this nonsense. And of course, it got canceled. Totally got canceled. Then Adam did his shotgun video in Washington, D.C., and he got busted. And then his whole organization, his whole team began to scramble and fall apart, attack each other. And so there was this organization called Shield Mutual. They were collecting donations for Adam Kokesh so he could afford lawyers. But this relationship between Adam and Shield Mutual didn't last very long. And Shield Mutual posted something about why this collaboration ended. You can still find this. And Daryl Young and Liz Delcano, they were attacking us. These are Adam's people, or were Adam's people. They attacked Shield Mutual for keeping some money, and everybody was attacking everybody. And Shield Mutual, they posted a statement with facts and stuff and said, "We're not dishonest here." And Delcano asked Adam's fans, asked the fans for $10,000 for lawyers. Then this was raised up to $50,000. They said, we need $50,000 to get Adam out of this mess. And it was not explained why they needed all that money. Another lawyer of Kokesh worked for less than $12,000. Another lawyer worked for nothing, worked pro bono, but also that relationship broke apart. And Shield Mutual said, no, it's actually the Adam Kokesh camp, his people. They don't show transparency about how they use donations. And later, Delcano and Yealy were fired, actually. Isn't that interesting? But, you know, it didn't lead to more transparency. Checks disappeared. YouTube payments disappeared. It was all just a big chaos. And then there were accusations flying around. Someone was stealing $21,000 from Adam's private bank account with the help of forged checks. Everybody was accusing everybody. Everybody was attacking everyone. And so Daryl Young was attacking Yeely, and a lawyer is was still waiting for thousands of dollars, and wow. And then Delcano and Yeely, they supposedly kept claiming they still worked for Adam, and Adam versus the Man, collecting more donations and talking about a Kickstarter project. And then you had Adam's former business manager, Lucas Jewell. And Jewell published a video where he says, or he claims that somebody else from the team was threatening to shoot him. So I have that for you here somewhere here in my collection here. So you can still find that. You can still find that on the web. You just look for Lucas Jewell and Yeely and Kokesh. And Yeely is accusing Daryl Young of forgery and all that sort of stuff. Everybody was accusing everybody. Everybody was attacking everybody. So these were Adam's friends. These were the guys that people donated money to. You know, complete chaos. You know, complete dishonesty. Then you had the activist Christopher Cantwell. And he said one of Adam's former guys is a member of a gang. And Cantwell told the story of how he was staying overnight at the house where these people lived, and they were shooting Adam versus the Man, Adam's show. And Cantwell says, I was woken up by this guy, and he said, no, it's time to commit some felonies. Wake up, it's time to commit some felonies. And he was asked to make false statements on some papers. That's what he alleges. And something about a new house Adam's crew was going to use. And he was asked to sign the stuff. And he was asked to do that, to sign these documents downstairs in the studio. Why would they do that? Where all these cameras are. And he was really uncomfortable with this. And I think he didn't go along with it. So... what the heck was that? Were they trying to film him doing something possibly illegal? And then Cantwell says, even after the raid, these people were running around in the house with drugs and guns, you know, carrying guns and doing drugs. I mean, this was shortly after the raid where they found guns and drugs, and this was a criminal offense. This was criminal. To you know, combine drug use and have guns. And so they were acting stupidly and just acting like this, according to Cantwell. And he also said Adam and his crew, they were smoking high-priced marijuana, really expensive weed, day and night. So, me being a non-drug, I don't use drugs. You know, I've, of course, 15 years ago in school, I had the odd little experiment, but that was it. I'm personally, I'm not using any drugs, so I just had to go on the internet, just Google, you know, not go to the Silk Road. Just use Google and look what is the price, or what was the price of high quality weed in the US in that particular area where they lived and smoked every day. So I found out that 1 ounce, that is almost 30 grams, and I kind of know what a gram of weed is. So an ounce of weed, quality weed, is $250, and my estimation, 5 people, they can smoke that almost in 1 day. So like 30 grams divided by 5 people, like a couple of grams, right? If they're heavy users and they smoke day and night, this could last 5-6 people maybe a day. So let's do the calculations. And of course, I don't know how many people there were at all times and how much they were smoking, but just so you can get a general idea of this. If you smoke this kind of weed, if you have all these people in the house, what does it cost per month? I calculated $24,000 just the weed, and then all the other drugs they might have taken or have taken. So these are the guys that you were asked to donate to for the cause of liberty. So these people could run around in their house, stoned, carrying guns, do all these drugs, and make this show. And cause all kinds of problems, right? These people who attacked each other, who accused each other of everything, they were spending that kind of money just on drugs. So then Lucas Jewell, the former associate of Adam, Lucas Jewell, he was kind of the business manager for Adam. Jewell was accusing his former buddies to have threatened him. Even former girlfriends, plural, of Kokesh, they threatened him with the government and shooting him, and he has recordings of this, and he wants to report this, right? So this was Adam's team. He picked those people. He lived and worked with those people, right? So again, you see a pattern of an unstable life and going from place to place, and every time he's working with somebody, living with somebody, it ends in chaos, right? So this is something that we see through his whole life. And so the last point I want to make is his anarcho-capitalism. So he's pushing this idea that it's the republic's fault. The republic is the problem. The borders are the problem, and the Constitution is the problem. Any sort of state is the problem, and this is the root cause of evil, and this leads to all the problems we've seen in the world so far, and we see today. And so his idea is to shatter the federal government, and then shatter the smaller governments, and shatter that, and shatter the next thing. And at some point, this is going to be this voluntarist paradise where everybody in the future can pick his own set of laws he wants to live by. So the Islamists can have their Islamic law in America, the communists can have their communist law, Scientology people can have their Scientology law, and tomorrow it might be totally different. You don't know what this country or what this place is going to be like in 5 years or 10 years. And anarcho-capitalism is a trend. It's a fad. It's nothing new, but it has kind of its heyday right now, or it had its heyday before Trump came, right? So Trump became so popular because he was telling people what they wanted to hear. So even some of the most staunch anti-government people, even cult leaders like Stefan Molyneux, even they started to talk positively about Donald Trump. So suddenly it wasn't cool anymore to be against political involvement. It was not cool anymore to boycott elections and voting. So it's a trend, and it has kind of infiltrated the truth movement. It has contaminated the truth movement. It used to be in America, the American truth movement, it used to be about the basic order, the country, the borders, Constitution, Bill of Rights, basic government, and then of course develop that further. But anarcho-capitalists are saying, tear it all down, no politics whatsoever, everything's going to be private. And more of these truthers are abandoning the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, and this is not a good thing. So Adam has been riding this train for a while, and I think he's continuing to ride this train. This is his fan base now. This is his personality. If he still believes in this or not, I don't know, but this is what he's pushing. because he makes a living, pushing this stuff to his fans. So, and then of course, in the election, which Trump obviously won, in the election, Ron Paul was refusing to endorse Gary Johnson, the candidate for the Libertarian Party. And Ron Paul even said he prefers the foreign policy of Green Party boss Jill Stein. And Jill Stein, she's just this Russian-loving. Jill Stein is just this suspicious Russian-loving creature. She goes to Russia and she meets President Putin, the dictator, and she wants to give the Russians and the Chinese what they want. That's her idea. And Ron Paul is scarily on the side of the Russians. I mean, he does what Murray Rothbard did. He makes excuses for Russia all day long. So most libertarians or most ultra-libertarians today would be hopelessly lost in the real world of diplomacy, war, and covert warfare. Government intervention in another country, military intervention, they're not automatically per se bad, And isolationism or non-interventionism is not automatically good. It's no use to go from one extreme to the other. The one extreme, the American empire being the world, this insane world police, going to the other extreme of doing nothing and letting the rest of the world do whatever they please, gather weapons of mass destruction and biological weapons, radiological and chemical. Let everybody else do what they do. Let every other country in the world become a victim of the Russian Empire and the Chinese Empire. It's just a dumb idea to go from one extreme to the other. And so in libertarian circles, you have a lot of stupid discussions like, shouldn't we help the Chinese more? Shouldn't we make more deals with the Chinese because that's libertarian and that's going to help them become free at some point? In reality, it's just helping the communist dictatorship in China. And there's stupid libertarian discussions about, should we save people who are subjected to genocide in another country? So they're even asking that question. If it's against the holy ideology, the holy libertarian ideology to save people with the military in another country who are being genocided, who are being killed en masse. So these people, they put their ideological nonsense and their ideological ideas above people. I myself, I run a business. I run two businesses under one roof. I'm married. I have children. I live libertarian values every day and conservative values every day. I live it every day. I'm not just sharing memes, libertarian memes on Facebook. I'm not just copying anarcho-capitalist claptrap on YouTube, right? I live this every day, and I see so many bad, horrible discussions. So, libertarian ideas and principles are just important pieces of a bigger puzzle. Libertarian ideas are not the whole puzzle, are not the whole thing. And many libertarians, especially anarcho-capitalist anarchists, they think they know it all. They think they have the whole idea, the whole concept, and everything else is below their ideology, right? Everything else is just everything else is inferior to their ideology. But libertarian ideas, they're just pieces to a larger puzzle. And libertarians have to realize that the biggest enemies of liberty, the grandest, most dangerous enemies of liberty, they hide behind liberties. They hide behind liberty. And so this is what many voluntarist libertarians don't understand. They think that you just have to remove the state and everything is going to be hunky-dory, or at least you have enough private security forces to shoot down all the bad guys, right? So libertarian thinking and anarchist thinking is not the one-size-fits-all universal mega theory. It's not. The modern republic, the modern republic is stuck in the 19th century or 18th century, right? It needs an upgrade. We need to incorporate modern research on human evil, right? The psychology of evil, the neurology, the genetics of evil, and the group dynamics of evil. That's what we have to use. We cannot have narcissists and psychopaths in government. We have to find out ways to keep them out of office. We have to find these ways, and we have to find ways to keep them out of our lives, our private lives, our business lives. That's the only way we can actually save ourselves from evil, right? We have to understand evil. We have to fix it scientifically. So no ideology is going to save you, because these ideologies were cobbled together centuries ago when we had no idea about genetics, we had no idea about psychology, and we had no idea about neurology and what that has to do with evil, right? The ideologies are not going to save you, because these ideologies don't understand evil, and they have these ideologies, they all have a weird understanding of evil, right? The communists think evil comes from the family and private ownership and the ability to trade, right? So they want to destroy these things to fight evil, but of course that creates a nightmare. And racists and neo-Nazis, fascists, they believe all evil comes from the Jews or anybody who doesn't look like the average Middle European. So the fascists argue you have to destroy all these people, and then evil will be defeated for good. Just total lunacy. And anarchists or libertarians, ultra-libertarians and libertarian anarchists, they believe that the state, the concept of a state, the republic, borders, and constitution, that this is the root cause of all evil. So you have to destroy that to fight evil and combat evil. This is a completely lunatic, outdated idea of evil. So people are being taught to boycott politics, to not get involved, to not really show their strength in politics. And it's terrible. It's terrible to boycott politics. It's terrible to boycott politics, and people's power, the people's power is being diminished by this boycotting, and our forces are neutralized. So people think anything voluntary is automatically good, and every time somebody forces someone, that's automatically bad. But that's not how reality is, right? Voluntary is not automatically good, and being forced is not automatically bad. You know, with government force, you can protect the national borders, you can enforce the rule of law, the basic rule of law. And there are many people, there are many things that people do, things that are bad for them, but they do it anyway. So, so people are still arguing they would not go to an election even if their one single vote could prevent a dictator. So that's kind of this ideological cult thinking that you see, and it's very, very dangerous. That is very, very dangerous. And so, anarchists like Adam Kokesh, they present to you three different categories of things, three different categories of ideas. Their basic ideological principles, and then they present to you their fantasy, their perfect fantasy of a free, voluntary society, the fantasy, and then they give you, and then they also give you their ideas of what they want to do right now or next week, you know, just concrete ideas for action to get towards that fantasy ideal, right? So these are the categories of ideas the anarchists give you, anarchists like Adam. the basic ideological principles, the fantasy, perfect society, and then they give you ideas of what they actually want to do to go towards and move towards that fantasy society. And in these discussions, during discussions, or when an anarchist like Adam explains something, these anarchists, they tend to jump back and forth between these things, between these categories, right? And you need to separate these categories, and you need to look at them individually and see, okay, does this hold water? Does this make sense, or does that make sense, or does it not make sense? For example, anarchists argue with their fantasy, but that's not a legitimate argument, right? Whenever you discuss something with an anarchist and you say, well, I don't think this is going to work, or I don't think that's a good idea, or this is going to turn out bad, usually you get a reply from the anarchist saying, well, in the voluntarist society, in the finished, complete voluntarist society, this wouldn't be a problem because this would be fixed by this and that and this and that. But that's not a counter-argument. That's not an argument at all. This is just a fantasy. It's like the fantasy of Islamists who say, in the perfect Islamic society where Sharia is implemented 100%, everything would be fine and hunky-dory, every problem would be solved. Or Scientology people will say, well, in the perfect Scientology society where everybody is Scientology, every problem would be solved, everything would be great. It's not a real argument because there has never been this perfect voluntary society that can defend itself, right, against foreign and domestic enemies. There's never been this dream society that lasted and had power, right? So it's a fantasy construct, and you shouldn't allow people in a discussion to use that fantasy as an argument, because it's not an argument. It's just a fantasy. So in a discussion, anarchists, they tend to use that trick. They jump back and forth between other arguments and using the fantasy, right? So they think they are right. They continue that idea that they know everything and they can answer every question. And then of course you have the basic ideological principles, and if you look at them, they're too basic, they're too broad. Everything should be voluntary. Voluntary is good. Involuntary things are bad, and involuntary things lead to more bad things, and only voluntary things lead to good things, right? It's overly simplistic. It doesn't really do justice. It doesn't really do the world justice. The world is way more complex. People like to hear easy answers and absolute principles, but mostly these ideological principles that the anarchists like Adam present to you, most of the time, these principles are just wishes. It's just a hope. Oh, everything should be voluntary. Nobody should be forced to do anything. That's a nice goal. That's a nice fantasy, but it's not a realistic principle, right? And this leads us to the next category of stuff anarchists like Adam Kokesh present to you, the category of what they actually want to do in the real world right now and next week and next year, things they actually recommend you to do to move towards this free voluntary society. And this is actually their weakest category, right? Because everything they suggest is weak, and they want to stay away from politics. They don't want to take political power, and all these ideas they propose, they're garbage, right? And they even say, well, it might take 1,000 years, but they do not want to contaminate their perfect ways and their sacred ideology. They don't want to contaminate it by making compromises and being politically active. So they don't want to compromise it. So they don't want to get politically active. They just want to spread more podcasts from Molyneux or Kokesh and the same stuff in books, and that's what they want to do. And then they dream about a community like with their own rules. They try that, and it usually fails because these anarchists, they start fighting with each other. We've seen a lot of projects like this, like the Gulch Chili community, where people just started fighting each other and suing each other. So that's what they suggest, but it never works. And yeah, and then they have some other ideas that don't really work. You know, they try to find ways to dodge taxes and stuff, and you know, this is the weakest thing. They have no believable way, no believable tools of actually getting any closer to their fantasy goal of the perfect society. They got nothing. They got nothing. And what they suggest, weakening the borders, letting everybody in who wants in, just weakening the state so that big corporations can get more power. All these ideas are just very, very dangerous, and especially if they're done wrong, if they're done like they're usually done. So if you allow, that's something anarchists suggest, if you allow Islamists to practice Islamic law in America or in Europe, that's a horrible idea. It's not going to increase liberty. So anarchists claim that people generally choose freedom. Usually they don't. Anarchists claim people make rational decisions as, you know, consumers or whatever, customers. People don't make rational choices. Then anarchists claim people learn from their mistakes either, or they from their bad purchasing choices, or they just go into a corner and sulk. They're not going to rise up and fight you. But that's also wrong. Unfortunately, people are drawn to irrational cult movements, and these cult movements get really big and really dangerous, and they're going to steal your freedom. So, then anarchists want to privatize police and the justice system, and of course, huge investors would then get the whole market, and this is actually what the globalists want: no more borders, nothing that stands in their way. Then you have stupid projects like Liberland, like this phony guy who lays claim to a small stretch of swamp in Eastern Europe, saying this is my country now, and of course he's not allowed to go there, he's not allowed to do anything there, and he's just stringing people along. So they give him money and donations, telling people this is going to be so great. Pure joke. Pure joke. And then, of course, the question, would you allow Chinese government or Chinese front organizations, Chinese investors, would you allow them to buy land, huge amounts of land in America, so they can build military camps there and store weapons there? I mean, anarchists say, if you buy a stretch of land, this is your property, you can do whatever you want with it. But what if China brings in 50 million Chinese to America, right? And start building military facilities and military installations? What then? Would you feel comfortable, right? If the Chinese use their bought property for whatever the purpose they want, would you enjoy that, or would you think, well, they're probably going to attack us once it becomes obvious to them that they're going to win, right? And of course, anarchists, they usually understand nothing about war, nothing about military matters, but anarchists believe their anarchist ideology answers every question for them. It answers every question. It's the perfect ideology. So they try to apply their ideology to military and war, and they think, well, people are going to voluntarily come together, buy themselves a tank, learn how to use that tank, and then they're going to look on the free market for a military goal they can achieve with their tank, and then they're gonna achieve it and get money. It's so stupid. I don't even know where to begin. And then some anarchists, they want these big private security corporations, private corporations with more weapons than any military on Earth and any other military on Earth. And this is, of course, really stupid and dangerous idea. So this was my take on Adam Kokesh, worst of the alternative media industry. If you think that was fair or unfair, please comment, like, share, and subscribe.